Hello, I'm Julia, and this video is all about my string quartet number 16. This is a very lively piece. It has a lot of momentum and it's basically a jig. It's all built over this constant underlying jig rhythm which pulses it forward all the time. There are a lot of things that I was playing around with in this piece, but it's basically a rondo built over this slightly odd sequence of chords. So each time we return to it, it cycles through these 5 keys, basically. It starts in C major, then moves to F sharp major, into G major, although occasionally it's C major, but usually it's G, then to D flat major, and then to G major, and then return to the beginning. So already there are 5 keys, so we've got something that's going to send us slightly off kilter because we're going to have 5 phrases each time the theme comes back. I've also started the melody on an E flat, even though we're in C major, so there's a bit of this major-minor ambiguity going on there as well. So we're in a slightly interesting harmonic world. I think I made a note of this somewhere where I described it as a bit of Vaughan Williams and a bit of Prokofiev, and I think I was thinking the folky jig type melody for the Vaughan Williams, and I think the harmony, maybe there was a bit more of a Prokofiev influence in there. Anyway, we start with an introduction that sets up this key sequence, essentially. And then from A, we get the first iteration of the rondo theme. From C, we get a repeat of the main theme, but this time rather than having 1 melodic line, we have 2 going on at once. And then from E, we get taken away from the rondo theme. So we have these long sustained notes, still against the jig rhythm, but they take us through various places, still playing around with the major and minor ambiguity, and not necessarily going where we might expect them to. They start off following the same chord sequence, but instead they turn through diminished and discordant bars back to G major, which then takes us back to the rondo theme at G. And from G, we get another repeat of the rondo theme. This time we get 2 voices playing the melody at once, but they're offset now, so we get this sort of canon effect. And then from I, we get another repeat of the rondo, but this time very pared down, so everything is reduced to the jig rhythm itself. At K, we get another new section. We move away from the rondo theme again, and at first it looks as though we're returning to the notes from the opening, at least in the first violin, but what we actually get is a sort of canon. Although parts aren't playing the same thing, but in fact they're repeating their own parts from the opening, just offset from one another this time, which gives some rather interesting chords. Eventually, after L, it diverges, and then at M, these motifs from the rondo theme start popping up again, but this time they're repeated a bit more insistently. They're still broadly following the chord sequence from the main theme, but it's all a bit more ambiguous because of all of the overlapping and the repetition of this motif. But eventually at O, it works its way back again to the rondo theme. This time we have a slight change to the rhythm, just to trip us up a little bit, just something we're not quite expecting. The first crotchet and the quaver of every other bar are now swapped over, which just gives it a little bit of a lurch. It doesn't quite sit comfortably anymore. And then the rhythm varies again at Q. Again, it's just a subtle change, but it's enough to confound our expectations and catch us out slightly, and that's kind of the idea. From S, we get a repeat of the earlier B section, but it's not an exact repeat. Again, I've been playing with offsetting the rhythms slightly and playing around with our expectations. So the rhythm this time is just slightly out from what we're expecting. The long notes start slightly off the beat, and the rhythm in the background is the altered version that we heard most recently rather than the original jig rhythm. We go back to the rondo theme again at U, but this time everything is in this Scotch skip kind of rhythm, the quaver crotchet, rather than the original crotchet quaver, which ratchets up the momentum. Just occasionally we have a bar or two that reverts back to the original melody, just to keep us on our toes a bit. And from here on in, we get faster and faster and more pared down. So from W, we just have a crotchet on each beat, still taking the original theme as its basis, but without any of the original rhythm. And then at Y, as well as changing the time signature and the rhythm, we effectively double the speed. So each 4-bar section of the original melody is now reduced to 2 bars, and it runs away with itself until it finishes with the chord sequence that underlies the whole thing.